Halton, as we know it today,
is rich in the history and modern traditions
of many First Nations and the Métis.
From the lands of the Anishinaabe,
to the Attawandaron,
the Haudenosaunee,
and the Métis.
These lands surrounding the Great Lake
are steeped in Indigenous history.
As we gather today
on these treaty lands,
our Catholic social teachings
call us in solidarity
with our Indigenous brothers and sisters
to honor and respect
the four directions:
lands, waters, plants,
animals, and ancestors
that walked before us.
All these wonderful elements of creation exist,
gifted to us by our Creator God. We acknowledge and thank
the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation
for being stewards of this traditional territory.
Thank you. Trustee Chua, could you please lead us in the opening prayer, the Our Father and the National Anthem?
If everyone could join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. In honor of International Women's Day tomorrow on March 8th, 2023, let us come together and pray for the women and girls we know in our lives, in our Halton community, and across the world. Every single day, women and girls strengthen our homes, our workplaces, our communities, and our country. They bolster our economy as entrepreneurs, spark change as climate activists, create opportunities as the heads of governments, and inspire generations that will come after them. We thank you and all the diverse women and girls from all ages, abilities, identities, backgrounds, and different walks of life who make a tremendous contribution to our Halton and global community. Together we pray in your name for all of our women and girls across the globe. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, for the Lord is with you. And if everyone could please stand for our national anthem.
Thank you, Trustee Chua. Thank you. Moving on to item 1.2, motions arising from in-camera. There was one motion arising from the in-camera session that will need a vote in the public session. I will read the motion. Resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board accept the recommendations of the Audit Committee to approve the revised internal audit plan for 2022-23. Resolved that the revised internal audit plan for 22-23 includes the following audits: staff mental health and wellness, school generated funds audit, and audit follow-up reviews. May I ask for a mover, please?
I'll move it.
Moved by Trustee O'Hearn Chanada. Looking for a seconder.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Trustee Murphy. I'll take it to a recorded vote. Trustee Agnew.
In favor.
Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Kelly.
In favor.
Trustee Saunders. In favor. Trustee Chua.
In favor.
Trustee Bowie.
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma.
In favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Powell.
In favor.
Trustee Kennedy.
In favor.
And Trustee O'Hearn Chanada.
In favor.
We have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention. The motion carries. Our next order of business is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda? And we have a consent agenda here. Do any of the trustees want to remove any of the items from the consent agenda? Sorry, I see Vice Chair Agnew, you have your hand up.
It's not about the agenda, Mr.
Okay,
Chair. I
sure.
can wait if you'd like to get through that first.
Sure. Let's do the approval of the agenda and come to that.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Trustee Vice Chair Agnew. So do we have any additions, deletions, or corrections once again? And do any trustees want to remove any item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll need a motion to approve the agenda. Looking for a mover, please.
I'll move it.
Trustee Murphy moves. Looking for a seconder. Trustee Carabella. We'll take it to a recorded vote. Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Kelly.
In favor.
Trustee Saunders. In favor. Trustee Chua.
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma.
In favor.
Trustee Bowie.
In favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Powell.
In favor.
Trustee Kennedy.
In favor.
Trustee O'Hearn Chanada.
I'm in favor.
Trustee Agnew.
In favor.
So we have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention. The motion carries. The agenda is approved. Vice Chair Agnew, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I actually just wanted to take a moment to recognize that Superintendent Ballo, this will be her last meeting. And just to speak for myself, as well as I hope with respect to the rest of the Board of Trustees, to thank you. So thank you for all the work that you have done, your commitment and diligence to our students with special education needs. You will be missed. We're sorry to see you go, but we're so excited for your next opportunity. So we wish you nothing but the very best as you move forward. And just wanted to say that we're sorry to see you go.
I will set up for this one. Thank you, Vice Chair Agnew, and I don't have to say much since you already said on our behalf, and all the best to you, Superintendent Ballo. So with that, we shall move on to our next order of business, which is declarations of conflict of interest. Do I have any other hands up? No. Declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared tonight? Seeing none, we shall move on to our next order of business, which is presentations. We have one presentation tonight, Equity and Inclusion PA Day presentation. Director Klein, would you like to introduce the presentation?
Yes, I would like to first of all say that we're very happy to have our team here with us, and I think Sita would be maybe introducing them when we get the opportunity, because it takes a bit of a team to move forward in terms of the goals of equity and inclusion. There was a president many years ago talked about some great social changes, and he said that these changes are as ancient as scripture and as clear as the Constitution. And I'd like to start with that tonight, that I think that the goals of equity and inclusion are ones that have roots in our gospel message, a gospel message that calls us to be inclusive and to celebrate all who are shining gems of the divine, of God. I would like to also remind ourselves that, maybe less importantly for us, there's also a great foundation of laws and regulations that go deep into the Canadian legal system and also into our historical customs as well. And also say that schools reflect societies and schools lead societies. And schools have an expectation of, again, reflecting what the norms are and of what the values are of a society, but they're also expected to help create a generation and generations ahead that will lead change that leads to a more just society and a more civil society. So it's really with great pride that not in addition to, but along with all the other things we do in Catholic schools, we also focus on the important challenges and the great gifts and celebrations of what we're about to talk about this evening. So with that in mind, I would like to introduce Sita Jayaraman, who is our equity officer, our human rights and equity officer. And she will introduce the team. Like anything that's a priority that we have in a board, in any board, whether it's reading, writing, and arithmetic, we have to ensure that, as Stephen Covey used to say, the saw is being sharpened, that we have people who are getting better at their job, and not just better at the practice of it, but understanding the why of what they're doing. And so when we do that, we sometimes have to take opportunities for professional development and build up the capacity of those. And that sometimes means as much unlearning as it does learning. And sometimes unlearning is painful and discomfort. There's discomfort, but as we've all learned in our personal lives, that it is only through that we become stronger and better at it. And it should be done fearlessly, and it should be done with the joy and compassion that reflects who we are. So with that homily, I will turn the mic over to our colleague, Ms. Jayaraman.
Good evening, and thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to share some information regarding the mandate and learning outcomes for the Equity and Inclusive Education PA Day that took place on February 17th, 2023. So the staff presentation report provides a lot of details on how we prepared for the day and what the themes were. So I'm not going to read it over for you. We also have a brief presentation today, which will highlight much of what is in the report, much of the information that's in the report. But before I hand over to my colleagues for a presentation, I just wanted to highlight a few things and share a little bit of a background and context for the work of the PA Day. So based on ministry identified provincial priorities for PA Days, February's PA Day was dedicated to equity and inclusive education with a specific focus on anti-racism and anti-discrimination at the personal, interpersonal, and systemic level, and tied into our board's faith theme and our equity and inclusive education policy. Equity and inclusion is really the work of every staff at the board, regardless of what their role is. And this is why we designated the PA Day as a system-wide learning, as a system-wide PA Day, which was open to all the schools and all departments of the CEC. The preparation for the topics began from the acknowledgement that issues of systemic racism and discrimination are real, live issues for institutions, including boards and including ours, and we must be vigilant and critically constantly evaluate our own practices so that we can work towards systems equity, so that we can support all our students to achieve, believe, and belong. The planning and implementation of the PA Day was truly a collaborative effort with involvement from Indigenous education, faith formation, curriculum, and human rights and equity. And I wanted to hand it over to my dear colleagues who are here to share some of what we talked about through a PowerPoint. And just before hand over. You, of course, know Sherry Sable, Indigenous Education Advisor, Amanda Gonzalez. I refer to her fondly as the honorary member of the Human Rights and Equity team because she's really with curriculum with a focus on equity and inclusion, but closely works with human rights and equity. Taliba Howard, our Human Rights and Equity Officer, and Sarah Agamiri, Human Rights and Equity Advisor. So thank you, and if you'd like to.
Thanks so much for having us here today. Present an overview of the objectives and outcomes for the Equity and Inclusive Education, Anti-Racism and Anti-Discrimination PA Day on February 17th, 2023. Slide. Thank you. As Sita mentioned, the ministry provides a list of provincial priorities for each PA Day during the school year. And for the 2022-2023 school year, equity and inclusive education, anti-racism and anti-discrimination is an identified priority. And the work of equity and inclusion, anti-racism and anti-discrimination is in alignment with HCDSB's faith formation theme, as well as HCDSB's policy on equity and inclusive education. In accordance with church teachings and Ontario's equity and inclusive education strategy, HCDSB's 8 principles of equity and inclusive education were upheld for this day. So equity and inclusion is a foundation of excellence. It meets individual needs, identifies and eliminates barriers, promotes a sense of belonging and acceptance, involves the broad community, builds on and enhances previous and existing initiatives, and is demonstrated throughout the system. And so as Sita mentioned, the mandate for this particular PA Day was to build systems capacity and to take action to address racism and discrimination at the personal, interpersonal, and systemic level. And so subsequently, the learning for the day was divided into 3 broad categories. Who are you? Who is in your Catholic classroom or Catholic environment? And what does the Lord require of you? And so for this day, we utilized the theological theme, which is what does the Lord ask of you? And that's taken from Micah. So what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with your God. And as Sita mentioned, the planning and preparation for this day was a collaborative effort with input from the departments of Indigenous Education, Faith Formation, Curriculum, and Human Rights and Equity. So next I'll pass it over to Taliba, who will go over how the day was facilitated.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for setting that foundation for us. So as Amanda stated, this was not only our legal and moral obligation, but we also had responses from previous PA days as well. And just to be sure that folks felt confident and comfortable enough to be able to deliver this particular material, we had 2 planning sessions for the PA day. So for the first planning session, we have entirety full day in person over at Country Heritage Park, where we modeled how the delivery of the PA day could look. We gave examples, we provided some resources, and we also provided scenarios as well, just so folks could feel, confident enough to be able to tackle this material. And for the second session, we had a half day virtual via Teams. And on the end of the first session, we asked folks to come to session 2 with, an agenda, just so we could prepare them and help them with what their agenda could look like. We also gave them support based on subject matter. So if they were having any troubles with, tackling certain topics, or if they wanted some more support on developing resources or outsourcing things, or deciding whether or not they would use the material that we modeled for them, as well as giving them additional information based on subject matter as well. And an example of that is we had our information, our contact information based on particular subject matter. So for instance, any curriculum-based questions that folks had, they directed those to Amanda. Any questions surrounding settler colonialism, we had Sherry Sable here answering those questions. So we did, make sure that we covered some of the questions that people may or may not have had. And I do want to mention that for both sessions, we had representation from every single school. Within our
board community, and we also had a representation from board staff as well. So different departments within our board that included departments within student or the Department of Student Success. It also included research, it included facilities, but we're not limited to those departments. Those are just some examples. In addition to that, we also piloted a communities of belonging space. And this space we provided based on feedback from previous PA days. You know, folks just wanted to be able to have conversations about anti-racism and anti-discrimination through the lens of their lived experience. So if they were members of equity deserving groups and were interested in having these conversations, but wanted the conversations to be tailored to their lived experience, we have this space available so that they could have these conversations with people who have similar lived experience. And we made sure that we focused on the foundations of settler colonialism, in addition to having folks model their land acknowledgement and what their personal connection to the land and the land acknowledgement is. And we also had the opportunity to model the idea of intersectionality. So we had real life conversations about people's lived experience and how they can use their particular identities to inform how they would be able to respond to racism and discrimination, in addition to the using that identity and their positions within the boards as well to dismantle racism and discrimination. Next slide, please.
The fight of racism and discrimination starts with identifying one's own location within the system of oppression. So for that reason, we started this training by discussing social location to help individuals understand what is their position, what is their location in the society with respect to systemic oppressions, and how the systemic oppressions gives them privilege and or oppression. Then we explored intersectionality to understand how our multidimensional identities shape our experiences of privilege and or oppression. And it is only with the deep understanding and comprehension of these two themes that one can learn the responsibility to respond to discrimination, to respond to racism, and find the best response to the incidents when they come up.
Thank you. Next slide. So once we have an understanding of who we are, through positioning ourselves with social location, we can enter into the space of systemic barriers. And so for the next leg of the presentation, or the PA day, sorry, we looked at who is in your Catholic environment. So we discussed who are we accountable to. So with an understanding of who we are, we can then start to think about who is in our classroom. What about our students' identities? What are the complexities within those identities in terms of facing systemic barriers that are found within the system of education? And again, through that intersectional approach, we understand that these systemic barriers are real, even if certain lived experiences have never interacted with them or have never had to face them. And so by understanding who we are, we can then begin to understand who's in our classroom. We had the conversation about the layers and complexities of systemic racism within, again, the system of education. We looked specifically at anti-Black racism through the OCT Professional Advisory on Anti-Black Racism. We had critical self-reflections on conversations and sometimes denials for this work, and really getting into confronting different myths and confronting the ways in which we see racism interact within the system of education. We also talked about the importance of representation in curriculum, as well as looking at de-streaming through an equitable and inclusive educational lens. And so from there, getting an idea of who's in our Catholic classroom, we can then start to think about how we can move awareness into action and look at what the Lord requires of us. Next slide, please.
Alrighty, so as these two wonderful people next to me stated, in order to be able to consider how we can do justice, we have to understand ourselves and the people around us. And one of the things that we considered as far as, how to dismantle racism in education was to look at anti-racist approaches to data analysis. And so data analysis is not only a responsibility that's reflective of the equity and inclusive education policy through, the equity and inclusive education policy through data collection, but as well as the Equitable Education Act of 2017, which also refers to research and data analysis. So considering things like the workforce census, in addition to when it comes out the student census, how do those numbers reflect the differences between the student population and the population of staff members that they'll interact with? So what can we use to use that data to improve the ways in which we interact with those students? We also considered implementing culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy, and this is CRP, to respond to learners' needs. So what do specific folks in our classrooms, what do specific folks with, different identities who may experience instances of oppression, instances of discrimination, how can we inform our practices to meet their specific needs based on their identities, based on, their abilities, based on the things that, they do to learn best? We also considered our procedure VI 102, naming and disrupting hate or bias motivated incidents, making sure that we, as adults in their lives are taking action when they experience things that, do not make them feel like they have dignity, that kind of disrupt the dignity of their personhood. And this is something that we reinforced throughout the day, making sure that people are disrupting it when it's happening and naming it for what it is, right? Because it's not only important for the people who it's, immediately affecting, the people who it's happening to, but as well as the people who are seeing it, so that they know that it's not something that we tolerate, and it's something that we're going to continuously try to make sure that we are preventing and responding to. We also, as stated, considered supporting equity-deserving groups and countering the myth of reverse racism. So supporting equity-deserving groups in programs like the Black Students Associations, the BSAs, the Black Student Unions, or the Black Staff Associations. So the importance of having these spaces so that Black staff, Black students can gather in community and be able to have conversations about the things that they experience and have conversations about the things that they'd like to see. The importance of having those spaces and why those spaces are, productive for them, and why those spaces don't interrupt, the well-being of, folks who are not in those communities. And I also want to mention, I didn't get a chance to mention earlier about the communities of belonging, is that the space was an invitational and optional space. So it's not that we were requiring folks to attend, but we wanted to give it as an option for people who had the interest to attend. Next slide.
And the next slide is just some feedback. We did a lot of exit surveys after the first day of learning and then the second day of planning. And we also got feedback from schools that took this learning back to their schools or departments and they shared some of their feedback. This is just a few sample of what folks felt they had got from the days. This is just for your review and consideration. So that sort of sums up what we wanted to share in terms of what the mandate was, how we conducted it, and hopefully it gives you a sense of sort of the planning and the thoughtfulness that went into creating the day. And my heartfelt thank yous to my wonderful colleagues for helping to put together. We also had Patricia Delben and Jillian Federico work with us on this. They were not able to be here, but my gratitude to my colleagues there as well. Thank you.
Quite some work done there. So thank you so much for your presentation. I shall now open up the floor to trustees for questions, and then I'll come back to you at the end. So trustees, do we have any questions for Ms. Chairman and the team out here? No questions? Oh, there I see a couple of hands. So we have a speakers list here. We have Trustee Saunders, Trustee Ohonchanara, Trustee Chua, Trustee Agnew. Trustee Saunders, you're up first. You have the floor. Trustee Saunders, mind putting your mic on, please?
Sorry.
And start from the beginning.
Sorry, I just want to thank you for bringing to us this very important report. It gives us an opportunity to listen and learn from students, staff, parents, and stakeholders. I do want to ask you is, in the course of doing this, did you look at what the Halton Catholic District School Board is doing and what's leading to our great success in this area? And how do we leverage and how do we learn from this? Did you have an opportunity to?
Thank you, Trustee Saunders. I'll pass this to Director
Yeah,
Klein.
sure. I'll start with that. And maybe I'll bounce back in terms of a question, a bit of a conversation. So for point of clarity, did we or did our team look at the success that we have experienced here at Halton Catholic District School Board in terms of moving the ball, as it were, of equity and inclusion forward? Like sort of looking back to see what the successes have been so we could better move forward?
Well, what I'm specifically mentioning is that, so, you know, I've done some research and I reviewed some empirical macro evidence to see how the board is doing. So one of the things I looked at was there was a report from it was Call to Action, Systems Abuse of Black Students Within Ontario Education System from the Parents of Black Children. And what they ended up doing was ranking all the school boards in terms of incidents of racial issues. And our board didn't even show up on the list, the top 17, like we're not even on the list, we're so far down. Also, I looked at the report, the Ontario Human Rights report, I think it was 2021, where they listed all the school boards, and our board was the lowest of all the school boards. I think we had less than 1% of the occurrences. So I think what this is telling me, and then also I think Superintendent Cordero highlighted some really important things that we're doing. So I think what this tells us is we've got a board that's got some pretty good programs, and we've got buy-in from the staff, we've got buy-in from the students, and we're doing a lot of really good things. And I think that, you know, we should probably be looking at what are we doing that's good? How can we continue to improve and leverage that? So I'm just wondering, like, sometimes I don't think we highlight the good news and all the positive things that we're doing and the buy-in. So I just wanted to know if in developing this report, we were looking at things like that, because apparently we must be doing a pretty good job. And what did we do to sort of identify and leverage those things going forward?
Director Klein.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, first of all, I will not argue with you in the concession that the board is a successful board and the board has much to be proud of. So you won't get anybody to disagree with you in this seat anyway. But I would say that we look at everything around us in terms of our past, our successes. We would look at data. We would look at the factors that speak to us in terms of the makeup of our staff and our students and what the needs are of them. But I would also say, and I'll turn this back over to Sita in this regard as well, that there is, the fact of the matter is, yes, there are things we can be happy with and proud of. But I would also have to say clearly that there is much, much work for us to do. There is much, much work for us to do at Halton Catholic, at other boards in the province, and as the province on the whole. And all I can help shape is this board. And I'm very lucky to have this team here that helps lead it, and those with whom I work every day, and trustees who again shepherd us toward that goal. But I think there is a lot to do. I think the lived experience and the responses from many of our communities that don't look like me or come from the background that I have would say that there is a lot to do, that they don't necessarily feel that all that benefits many of us doesn't necessarily come at the same cost for them as it does for us. And I think we have to listen to that, and I think we have to respond. Are we getting better? I absolutely do. When I look at, I think, my own life, my own profession, but for those who've been waiting, that's a long, long time to wait. And I think many, when I think about it, have every right to be impatient and expect us to do better, and we will do better because we are very good. So what I just want to tip that over to our Human Rights and Equity Officer.
Thank you very much for that question. And I think it's important that when we think about the work of Indigenous education or human rights and equity and inclusive education, the purpose of this work is not to name or shame or put blame on anybody. The purpose of this work is to really be constantly vigilant and critically review where can we do better, because I always think that we made a commitment as the board to 100% of our students to achieve believe and belong, not to 90%, not to 95%, but to 100%. So there is really that need for us to say, who is that 10%, who is that 5% that's not achieving believing and belonging at the same level? And that's the work of human rights and equity. That's the work of understanding who are those whose voices are not centered and who are not, who are marginalized. So I think it's important to think about it that way. And when we think about, some of the questions that come to the Human Rights and Equity Office in terms of how do we deal with particular incidents, how do we deal with particular issues, that speaks to the need. That speaks to the need to continue to build capacity. We've done a lot of work to build capacity, but this is also not a one and done, or even, if I've had 5 trainings in this, now I'm the expert, is that this is a lifelong commitment to, as Director Klein stated, to really unlearn, but a lifelong commitment to continue to learn. And there's no end point. This is an evolution that's out of a lifelong learning. So I think we need to approach this work from that point of constantly learning, being critically aware of what's happening, what our parents are telling us, what our students are telling us, and listening to those voices. And this is why I started off that way by saying, we cannot have this Halton exceptionalism view, right? That, systemic racism is an issue for all other boards, but not here. I think that that undermines the good work that we're trying to do, because we need to be vigilant and we need to continue to look at that and see it as a systems issue. It's not about blaming individuals. And when talking to parents and students, we know that there's much work that we need to continue to do.
Thank you. Trustee Saunders, do you have a follow-up?
No, I agree there's much work to do. It's just that I think there's a lot of good news stories that I don't think we hear enough about. I think we've got significant buy-in to a lot of these initiatives. And I think our teachers and our staff and our students are very engaged. And I think that sometimes it's good to hear the good news as well. So I think that's what I want to say. And I agree there are many issues that we have to continue to work on. But I think we've got some good people, really committed people, really interested people. And I think, if we can leverage that as much as possible, I think that's would really help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Saunders. We shall now move on to our next speaker. We have Trustee Ohanchanara. You have the floor.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was very well done. And just a couple comments. As I was going through the presentation at home, and again tonight, I've made notes for myself, because there's certain things that I need to go back and learn. So settler colonialization, I need to understand fully what that means. I don't know what it means. And I'm not ashamed to admit I don't know what it means. And modeled intersectionality. So I've got some homework to do, because, being elected as a trustee, one of our main jobs is student achievement. So as you were going through this presentation, the metaphor in my head was, we're going down a road and here's a roadblock. So how do we remove that roadblock to get to the end, which is student achievement? And all these things that we're discussing are roadblocks that are in our way. And to teach them, how do we remove these roadblocks so at the end of the day, our students can achieve? So with my trustee hat, with my mom hat, with my Janet hat, so I thank you for this work. And really, we're imperfect human beings. That's how we're made. There's nothing wrong with being imperfect. It doesn't mean we're not doing good. It just means we're imperfect. And hashtag, we want to be better. That's all that means. So thank you for the presentation, and I have some homework to do. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Trustee Ohanchanara. Up next is Trustee Chua. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I just want to bounce off of what Trustee Ohanchanara stated. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for your hard work of what you're doing, supporting our teachers of how they can help support our students within our classrooms. I know throughout the past 5 years or so, we've seen a very major change within our classrooms and within our teachers because of all the amazing work you do. So I just want to say thank you so much, and I can't wait to see what all of you come up next and how you can help our teachers support our students.
Thank you, Trustee Chua. Up next is Vice Chair Agnew. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, and through you, Mr. Chair. So again, thank you to your team. for coming here and presenting all this information. A couple of comments, but one is, we often get asked by parents, why so many PA PD days? And I think it's important that, anyone listening or people that are participating are understanding that this is the important work that's being done amongst other subject areas. But this is one of the important pieces of work that's being done during these days where they have their kids at home with them, because we are working to continue to educate our educators on these important matters, and especially something that's a ministry mandate. And I just wanted to make a comment, and Trustee Saunders is very correct. We do some excellent work, and I try to spend a lot of time at this table as well as publicly talking about the great work that we do at our board. But on the note about that report that did come with respect to the Halton Catholic District School Board, we were actually named as a board to watch. And I truly believe that the only way we prevent ourselves from moving up into that list of boards that are an issue is by the work that you're doing. I'd like to not even be a board to watch, but I certainly don't want to move our board up into a list where we're being defined as being an issue. So I do honestly believe that the work that we're doing is not only addressing the existing issues that may be in our system, but hopefully working preventatively so that we don't see further issues becoming bigger. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and just a comment that I wanted to make.
Thank you, Vice Chair Agnew. Up next is Trustee Kelly.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you so much for all of the work that all of the staff has worked on. It's been incredible to see the process that's been going on, probably years in the making. And as Trustee Agnew and trustees have already mentioned, we've already done a lot of good work in Halton Catholic, but also with the Parents of Black Children report, as Trustee Agnew has mentioned as well, there was a report that mentioned that we are a region to watch for, and that regardless of if we're good or bad, there's never too much work that can be done to make sure that all students feel safe and welcome. Even if it's one student, we should always be there to help and make sure. And actually from that report, I can mention that there were over 30 attendees, including board staff, trustee candidates, and parents, in which they mentioned that there was an alarming rate of racial abuse and lack of accountability. So lots of that does need to be addressed, but I can see that currently at the moment there is a lot being done, and I'm really looking forward to more that's going to be helping more staff and students feel better and represented and safer.
Thank you, Trustee Kelly. Up next is Trustee Powell. Trustee Powell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo what has been said and just say thank you so much for the presentation. I echo what Trustee O'Hearn, Chinada, I got that right, said, is we have a lot to learn. And I do think there are so many good things happening in our board. And what I think has been happening is for so many years, we did hear what was good and we didn't always want to hear what was bad. And even the difference from my oldest son, who's 25, to my youngest, who's 15, that we're starting to hear that this has been happening for a long time, but we didn't want to talk about it. And it's uncomfortable, and it's hard to sit with it, and we don't always know what to do. And so we ask the questions and we educate ourselves, and we can just listen. So thank you. And I hope we have more of these sessions and we just share your knowledge.
Thank you, Trustee Powell. Up next is Trustee Bowie, and you have 3 minutes. No, go ahead, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just wanted to, again, echo the thanks. And one of the most common issues that I've heard throughout my past 2 years as a student trustee have been issues of, racism and colonialism in our system, from staff, from other students, from, student senators. It's one of the most pressing issues that our students have brought to us. So thank you for doing this work. And this is definitely something that we're going to be bringing back and sharing with all of them to share the great work that you all are doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Bowie. Up next is Trustee Kennedy. You're not spoken, so I shall jump to you first. Trustee Kennedy, you have the floor, and then come back to Trustee Kelly.
Great, thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering, how many participants did we have in the program out of the amount that is for all the teachers are available and all other stakeholders? How many people did we have that attended?
I'll pass this to Director Klein.
And I'll ask again, just a clarifying question. Is this for the PD day, the
yes.
PA day? Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. And before I answer your question, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my colleague, Christy Davison, who was also hugely helpful. So please, my apologies. I do want to say that before I move any further. So the way the system-wide PA was set up was to say that really this learning needs to happen at every school and all departments. And because we have a staff of like a large several thousand people. So what we did was to say from every one of our schools, we would invite one administrator, so the principal or VP, and an equity champion. So 2 people, and some schools chose to bring more than 2 people from every school, plus representatives from the different departments that were mentioned. The idea was that they would come, take the learning, do the 1.5 days of learning with us, and then go back to their school. And on the 17th of February, the entire school would then learn along with the administrator and the equity champion and the equity team at every school. So really the impact of this day is for our entire system. Every one of our schools and Thomas Merton participated in the learning. We had different learning for the curriculum, curriculum services, student services, spec ed services. So we had, it was pretty much everybody, but because we couldn't train all 3,000, 5,000 of everybody together, what we did was to take representatives from each school and then have them go back and share that learning back so that we would really build the capacity of every individual within the system. Because as I mentioned, this is really the work of everybody, no matter what their role is at the board.
Thank you. Trustee Kennedy, do you have a follow-up question?
Sure. Yes, thank you. Just looking at the mandate that you have to build systems capacity, the mandate, how do we measure the success of the mandate? Is there data that's being, crunched or developed, or surveys? Like, how do we measure if the mandate is moving forward and it's progressing?
I'll pass this to Ms. Chairman.
Thank you for the question. And that's a really good question, right? We need to have indicators and criteria as to, so where is it landing? Is it landing? What is the differences? What's the difference that this training is having? So we do that through, in conversation, for example, through the curriculum services, we go to different subject councils and have conversations with them to say, how are you embedding this learning in your actual curriculum? We measure this when schools come to us and say, we've had an incident. How do we respond? We track to say, okay, how are you responding to this? We're also tracking the data, and part of the procedure is that at the end of the year, we will look at the data to say how many incidents have we had, how did we respond to that, and over time, are we seeing a downward trend in terms of data, in terms of the number of incidents decreasing at our board? So there's several ways of looking at that. Through our partnership with the research department, we will be able to look at, what does the student data tell us about achievement and well-being, and over the years, do we see some of those gaps being bridged? So again, this is a long-term work, and this is again organizational culture shift. So this is not immediately sort of measurable, because we're trying to move a system of 5,000 people and systems that have been set up in ways that have not been inclusive of everybody. So that measurement is going to be have to be very intentional and measured. Yeah.
Thank you. Up next, we have Trustee Kelly. Thanks. Trustee Kelly.
Thank you, and through you, Mr.
Oh, sorry. You had a follow-up question.
Yes.
Yeah. I gave you a follow-up. You want a clarification question? Or you
So
want
is there just 2 total questions?
Yes, I'll come back to you.
Oh,
if you want to ask a question, I'll come back. Yeah. So Trustee Kelly, you're up next.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to have a question just because of that comment. So I do know that during the presentation, it was mentioned that there were some different groups that were available, specifically some Black Excellence programs that were available for students and staff, and it was totally optional for them to join. I do think it's important to hear from members of our educational board who have had these lived experiences and should be involved in our process. So I was just wondering, are staff on leave, retired staff, or also like alumni and different students who have been involved in our board but are not currently present allowed to attend by any chance?
I'll pass this to Director Klein.
Good question. So you're asking in terms of the professional activity days, in this case, right? I think we're narrowing on that one. Staff who are, I thought I heard you say retired and
not currently present, or also alumni as well, student alumni.
student alumni. Well, the professional activity days are, as I think Superintendent Donalfo noted the last time when we talked about our school year calendar, I would argue I think it'd be great if we had more professional development days because teaching and educating is complex work. It's difficult work. We've seen just from this presentation today that it has a lot of passion around it and a lot of potential to change. So I would argue we probably need more days for that. But within the regulations from the province, you know, allowing schools to have these days when they could professionally develop, it is understood that those are for staff that are, you know, currently employed, currently in a role, and not for those who depart from that. I would say that in terms of resources that are created during these, those are usually archived and those are often available. And I can't imagine that if they were requested that they, in many cases, I think that we'd be open to sharing those with others. And of course, the team does professional development, as do all our professionals outside of professional activity days as well. But I'm not sure if there's anything my experts want to add to that. No? Okay.
Thank you. Trustee Kelly, you have a follow-up?
Yes, just a follow-up. So I guess just to clarify myself again, so it's not necessarily connected to the PD days, but more so like different consultations that can involve us better progressing our board's policies, especially because I do believe that we had a town hall meeting last night for different parents of racialized students. So something similar along those lines would be able to include other retired staff or student alumni. And I guess I'm speaking specific to consultations rather than PD sessions.
Thank you. Was that a clarifying question or? I didn't hear the question.
Yes, that was.
Okay, Director Klein.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And I think I'm understanding you to say that in our search for data or feedback in terms of our efficacy, would we be looking to those outside of those who would be within the walls of a school during a PA day confined to those days? And I think, I mean, in a way, you kind of answered that in terms of the feedback around our town halls. So I think that would be opportunity to gather information, if I understand you right.
Yes, that's
correct.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Kelly. You got the answer to your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Up next is Trustee Carabella. Trustee Carabella, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I have, I'm curious about the pilot initiative, the communities of belonging. So just for clarifying, is this something that is offered just on this PD day or will it be offered on other PD days?
I'll pass this to Director Klein again.
Sure, and I will pass this over very shortly. I first of all like to say that I think there was a very good explanation by our team regarding that. I'm not saying that we missed that, but I think it's important that we have those opportunities to have places of safety and of camaraderie where people can share their lived experience. This has probably not been something that would have been common practice at this board or other boards leading up to it, and I think all the more reason why it's a good opportunity to attempt it, because we want to, the more we know, the better we are. And again, to reflect again what the Holy Father is asking us to do, to listen without judgment and to carefully try and discern what people are saying to us is really, really important. And I think safety is everything when it comes to that. But I will bounce it over to my colleague.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So as was noted, this is the very first time, to my knowledge, in the history of this board, we've had this sort of an opportunity that folks from equity deserving groups can come together to an off space and again, a deep gratitude to Sherry Sable for organizing this space and creating space and helping with and doing helping people do the learning. And we had a really good response, and the feedback from the participants was one that really gave us hope as a team that clearly there is a need for this and that we need to continue to offer this space. In fact, afterwards, we heard other members say, oh, I wish I had come there. But, you know, this is the first time, so people weren't really sure what to expect. But I am very hopeful that the awareness will spread and that community will grow, and more people will come out and share in those spaces. So I'm confident that we will definitely be offering it again in the coming years. And this is the best practice that's done by a few other boards, not all boards, but definitely one that as a team we're really proud of this year.
Thank you. Trustee Caravella, you have a follow-up?
Yes, so would there be a data that you'd be collecting at the same time to see how many people were involved in it?
Yeah, I think
At
Ms.
each
Chairman. Yeah.
So we do have the data, but and we asked folks how sort of, you know, what their experience of the day was. So we do have that data.
Thank you, Trustee Caravella. Clarification?
Well, I had one more question.
Okay, so I'll come back to you
Okay,
on
thank
that
you.
one. So Trustee Kennedy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Sita. Just wondering, you mentioned about the data. Would you be able to, you mentioned that data you're collecting data. Would you be able to share that data in the future with the board? Some of the data you've been collecting?
So the data around hate or bias motivated incidents at the end of the year, for sure, I can share that.
No, previous question about how we're succeeding and how we're working towards our mandate. And you mentioned that you're collecting feedback and data. Would you be able to share some of that in the future?
Sorry, can you repeat? I couldn't hear you properly. So
I
the
think,
data about what?
To clarify, I think you're adding on to the question which Trustee Carabel asked about collecting of data.
No, my question was, we have a mandate, right? And we're working towards meeting our mandate, and we're collecting data to know if we're progressing, are things improving, are we meeting our mandate?
Okay.
And we mentioned that we're collecting data to show that we're meeting our mandate. Would you be able to share it in the future to show us like if things are improving, or is there more to do to improve them?
Yeah. So there's several data points, right? Because when we think about systemic racism as a complex, multi-layered issue, there's not one single data point that's going to tell us we are there or we've achieved. So there's several data points. One of the data points, thanks to Trustee Kelly, is now on our website, which is the number of training sessions that we offer a year. That's one data point, right? So if you go on our website and you look at the number of staff trainings, you can look at the kinds of trainings we did, the topics we did, the number of people who participated. So that's one way of measuring how much training are we doing there. The other data around looking at, you know, what number of incidents we have, that data, because this is the first year we really started collecting this data. At the end of this school year, we're hoping to have that, and definitely we can share that. And so those are some of the data points that we have and we are collecting, and we're happy to share.
Thank you, Trustee Kennedy.
Thank you. You answered my question.
Okay,
I just had one more, just to follow up.
Go on.
You have some feedback comments from 3 participants. Do you have more feedback comments you can share as well? Yeah, sure. Okay.
All right. Yes, absolutely. We can share another sample of a few more. We collected lots of feedback. We didn't want to inundate folks with all the feedback, but we're happy to share some more. We can send that to you.
Thank you. By email, you can send
Yes,
to Trustee Bain.
for sure.
Thank you so much. Trustee Carabella, before I come to you, I'll just go to Dr. Collymore at the back. You have your hand up, Dr. Collymore.
Oh, through you, Mr.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. You put your hand down.
Yeah, I put it down. Sita
Okay.
mentioned.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Trustee Carabella. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to follow up with the communities of belonging. So there's certain groups that were invited, were welcomed. And just wondering which group wouldn't have been welcome? And then would they have had some training alongside, or what would have happened with the people that didn't participate?
Ms. Jaraman?
Sure. Thank you for the question, and through you. So the 2 events happened concurrently. So for the entire system, there was the PA day, and whether they were at the school level, whether they were at the CEC level, there was this same PD happening. in addition to that, concurrently, there was a communities of belonging where we said, if you self-identify as a member of an equity deserving group, and we identified what those are, you are welcome to come here. It's not mandatory, but this is an additional space for you. So regardless of who you were in this board on that day, you got this learning. This was just an additional opportunity for this community of belonging for folks who identified with different equity deserving groups, and we mentioned those different equity deserving groups.
Thank you.
So everybody got the learning.
Trustee Carabello, you have a follow-up?
No,
Okay, thank you. I do not see any other hands up here, but I have a couple of questions if I can ask. So my question here is, we have I heard you talking about the Ontario Education Equity Plan of 2017. How does this PD session relate to that plan, and do we need to implement that plan, and what happens if we do not? So I'll pass it to Director Klein.
I can start by saying, yes, the plan is one that is mandated by the province of Ontario. It is one that began to take get some traction before COVID hit. And like a lot of things, I think as we write ourselves, it's something we are able to lean into and embrace much more fully. So it is going back to my initial comments. This is something that is not an option or something that's a frill or something that is not well considered or rooted. But I will turn this over once again to my friend to add a little more to that answer.
Thank you for the question. So when you talk about the Ontario's Education Equity Plan 2017, that really is an iteration of many, many previous years of government documents, mandates, strategy, starting in the 1990s to the one of the first documents around the PPM 119 and the Promise of Diversity strategy, which was in 2009. Then the government of the time came out with another strategy in 2013 to say, how do you need to have policies? So all boards, including ours, were mandated to have an equity and inclusive education policy and the 8 pillars that speak to all the different things. So the 2017 plan was really building on all those previous plans and is a roadmap on how to address systemic barriers and eliminate discriminatory practices in education. So when you think about eliminating systemic barriers and discriminatory practices in education, that's exactly what this PA did, was to look at, how do we eliminate systemic barriers? What are those systemic barriers? How do we eliminate racism and discrimination at the personal and interpersonal level? So there was a direct tie-in to the Equity Action Plan, but also our own 8 pillars in our E&I policy, which speaks to professional development, inclusive curriculum, transparency, data collection, school community leadership. So these are the pillars that any kind of PD we do at the board is linked to that policy, and that policy is linked to the PPM and all those other government documents. So it's absolutely rooted in that. I also think that, from what I have learned from coming to this board about Catholic education, the work of human rights and equity is really a given, or should be a given in Catholic education, because I'm learning from my colleagues, Patricia and Jillian, they always talk about it's recognizing the inherent dignity of every human being. And what is human rights and equity work if not that, if not recognizing the inherent dignity of every human being? So I think that is our moral mandate. There's a ministry mandate. And most importantly, if we don't do this work, we are also exposing ourselves to legal risk, because it is the law to uphold the human rights code. So what happens if we don't do this work? We are in violation of ministry mandates. We are not living up to Catholic values, and we are exposing ourselves to legal risk.
Thank you. I have just one more question here. Sure. Question is here. There are some outcomes for the Equity Plan 2017. There's some action items and there's some outcomes. How are we tracking there? Are we facing any hurdles to implementation of the plan? So.
Right. And I think that, we've, as I mentioned before, we've done a lot of work. So when we look at some of the things that, it speaks to big picture outcomes, it is to create environments that are free of harassment and discrimination. So our new procedure, VI 102, speaks to those things. All our PD sessions, all our PD PA Day learning speak to those pieces. Our emphasis on culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy, again, is an outcome that we are working towards. And this is ongoing work, right? So this is not like we do 3 learnings on culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy and now we've achieved it, but this is sort of continuously coming back to those concepts. And the work, as I mentioned, of data collection, data analysis. So these are some of the outcomes that we are working towards, and we've made some strides in, but of course there's more work to be done and there's often challenges in doing this work, and we continue to face those head on, address them, and try to move it forward.
Thank you. I have no other questions. I see Trustee Kennedy, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering regarding AP in particular, seems like a program that really prepares students for university. And we had a presentation last week from Superintendent Cordero about what they're doing to increase equity, eliminating certain entrance exams, and increase financial support. Is there anything you can think of in that particular program? I know we're rolling it out to more schools that would make it to eliminate any barriers to students signing up for the AP program, as an example, or IB?
I'll pass it to Director Klein.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Trustee Kennedy. As I understood the question, is there anything we could do to eliminate those barriers further?
Do we have barriers in the AP or IB program that we could eliminate to make sure it's more accessible to everyone? Other than, I guess, physical, like location?
I would have to say, and I want to see if our equity officer could weigh in on it, and perhaps even our Dr. Collmore. I would think that any program that any board has should be one that's constantly reviewed and constantly reviewed to ensure that that it is open to all and anybody. At the same time, I'd like to say that AP is a program that's important to us, a program that we began years ago, and it's a program that we value and cherish. But I'm not sure if there's any comment from you, Sita.
Yeah, sure. And then I'll hand over to my colleague Amanda as well. So again, I think that, it's important for us to continually look at, what are those issues, particularly when we think about, we have a large number of students in these AP programs, and there are some really good, great benefits, and there's increasing interest in our programs. But again, when you think about it from the lens of, representation, so then are our teachers representative of the students or the diversity within the student population? Are there any disparities in terms of within that population, disparities in outcomes for particular groups of students? So in every level, the idea is not to wholesale, negate or minimize the program, but to ask those critical questions, to say, okay, so where are those inequities within those programs, and how can we address those in terms of, is the curriculum within the AP and IB culturally responsive and relevant? And I know that many of these conversations have been happening at Subject Council, and perhaps my colleague Amanda would like to speak to some of those.
Yeah, thank you so much. Exactly that, right? When we're talking about, for instance, de-streaming in grade 9, but then the question that is coming from our leaders is, if we're de-streaming in grade 9, but then we're still offering pre-AP, is that not just another form of streaming, right? And so when we talk about de-streaming through that equitable lens, we recognize, as Sita said, like the concept of embedding culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy. Is there space for that in AP courses? Yes, to a certain degree, right? But the curriculum in these courses is far more rigid because it's external, right? And so it works with the Ontario curriculum, absolutely, but how much can we embed that is an ongoing conversation. So to give you some context of the curriculum documents that have been written for de-streaming, so Math 1W and Science 1W. In the front matter of those curriculum documents, it actually talks about social location, talks about implementing CRRP, talks about systemic barriers, talks about the importance of students' identity. Where is this in the AP curriculum, right? And so that's kind of that conversation. So eliminating certain barriers for access to the programs is fantastic, right? But we also have to think about what's a part of those programs, right? And again, thinking about things like representation. So there's a comment made earlier about, looking at the road to student achievement, right? And like the barriers that are in the way. I encourage all of you in this room to actually rethink that road itself and to recognize that the systemic issues within education is actually on the road. So it's understanding that that road was not built for every student. And so from a curriculum standpoint, what can we do as classroom teachers to make sure that where there's misfooting, again, because that road wasn't made, where can we provide those opportunities to get students to achieve?
Thank you for the responses. Thank you for trustees for the questions. We had a long discussion. Thank you, Director Klein, and thank you, Mr. Raman, and your staff over here. I'm sure this is a small group of the team that you have implementing the things that we are implementing in our system. So thank you so much for bringing. Director Klein wants to interrupt me. Director Klein.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I do want to address one other item, and it has to do with often there is a perception that what we do as a school board or often as a society is this one more thing or as an addition, or maybe even some might consider it a distraction. Sometimes people in education, Catholic education or any publicly funded education think, well, our main job is to have students achieve the skills that are going to allow them to choose a pathway in life where they can be the most fulfilled. And sometimes the older among us might talk about, the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic and getting the skills they need to move forward. The work that we have seen described tonight, as it is now, as it was, and now hopefully it will be in terms of our aspirations, is not an add-on to that. This is something that should be, it's kind of the fuel that might be able to allow us to get some more successes in other areas. So if we consider students who might not feel engaged or teachers who might not have the skills built up to meet their needs, then this will go a long way to help it. And I think it would help with student achievement. I just wanted to say that because, again, I think sometimes we miss the fact that these are all complementary and that these are, the thing that we might consider the most important can be actually complemented by this.
Thank you, Director Klein. And continuing where I left off, once again, thank you so much for coming to the board and presenting. We look forward to the great work that you're doing and helping break barriers and breaking down systemic discrimination in our system. Thank you so much. We now move on down to our next order of business, which is delegations, and we do not have any delegations tonight. Our next order of business is the consent agenda items. Following items have been agreed upon at the agenda approval to stay on the consent agenda. We have an action item and we have a noted item. We have one action item, 6.11, noted items 6.2.1, 6.2.2, 6.2.3, 6.2.4, 6.2.5, 6.2.6, and 6.2.7. As I said, we have one action item and there will be a vote on that action item only, and there will be no discussions on the noted item. I will read the motion for the action item 6.1.1. Resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board approve consent agenda item 6.1.1 on March 7, 2023 as submitted. May I have a mover for the action item?
I'll move it. Oh, sorry.
Moved by Trustee O'Hearn Chinara.
I can second it, Mr.
Seconded by Vice Chair Agnew. I'll take this to a recorded vote. There's going to be no discussion here. So I'll take this to a recorded vote. Trustee Kelly is not here. Trustee Saunders?
I want to say the word approved, but I know that's not the right word.
In favor.
In favor.
Trustee Chua?
In favor.
Trustee Boy?
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Trustee Powell?
In favor.
Trustee Kennedy? In favor. Trustee O'Hearn Chinara?
In favor.
Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee Murphy?
In favor.
So we have 7 in favor. 7 in favor, None opposed and no abstention. Motion carries. The consent agenda carries. We shall not be talking about the noted items. We'll move on to our next order of business, which is we skipped the approval of the minutes. We skipped business arising from previous meeting. We have no further action items. Our next order of business is staff reports. Item 10.1, HCDSB expansion of the arts program feasibility study. Superintendent Kroll, you have the floor. Please present your report.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Pleased to be here tonight to present the results of the arts programming survey that was done for parents. You may recall or may not recall, because not all of you were around the table at the time, there was a motion at the October 18th board meeting where staff were directed to determine the feasibility of offering specialized arts programs at HCDSB schools. So recently we conducted that survey. So sort of between February 9th and 15th, parents were surveyed to determine their potential interest in a regional arts program with over 4,600 responses received. I'm going to take this point to certainly thank Dr. Collymore and her team, and also Andrea Swindon and her team for helping getting the survey written, getting the survey out, collating the responses. It was a lot of work in a short period of time. When we described a regional arts program to parents, we sort of said, here's what it would look like. It is optional programming, not mandatory programming. It could be offered at elementary or secondary schools. It's rooted in the Ontario curriculum. And I think that that's something we want to make sure that parents understand. It's not being taught outside of the Ontario curriculum. It's just there's emphasis in one or more areas of interest in the arts. It aligns with our Ontario Catholic School graduations, and it could be paired, especially in secondary, with other specialized programming, like a specialist high skills major. I provided you a very lengthy report with lots of numbers, so I'm not going to go through all of those. I'm just going to provide you just sort of some highlights. As I said, we had over 4,600 responses. Response rates were high, sort of across divisions and across municipalities, with the highest in Oakville, Milton, and Burlington. But like I say, yeah, I think I agree, Trustee Agnew. It was pretty impressive to see how many responses we got. Who knew? So of those 4,600 responses, 4,700 responses, we had 81.6% say they're interested or they're very or extremely interested in a regional arts program with a variety of interests in specific drama, dance, media arts, music, and visual arts programming. The things that parents identified to us that would influence their enrollment were a few things. They said, number one, and not surprisingly, their child's own interest in visual arts or dance or drama or whatever it is. That was the highest. The second would certainly be the location of the program. So where we choose to house this program within our board, whether it's one centralized school, whether it's sort of a program in each municipality, or whether we have multiple schools spread across the board. And then finally, the opportunities that we create for students in the future beyond secondary school. Whether they would be likely to travel to another school for this program, almost 50%, 45% said they would be likely or extremely likely. 29.9% selected unlikely or extremely unlikely, and then another 25% said they were neutral. We asked parents then a couple of open-ended questions. We wanted to know from them how they felt we could make a program as successful as possible. They identified a few things. So Dr. Collimore's team was able to provide specific themes out of their responses. In the report, you'll see you got all of the responses. The themes that we identified were offering programs at multiple and specific locations. Parents feel strongly about transportation being required. You'll recall that for some specialized programs, such as French immersion, we do offer programming. For other specialized programming like AP or IB that was already referenced tonight, we do not. Offering the program outside of school hours is interesting. When we were drafting this, we were thinking of in school during the day curricular opportunities and not of extracurricular opportunities. So that's something that LSAP will have to consider as something that parents are identifying may be an opportunity they're looking for. And then finally, ensuring that schools have qualified teachers, so experts in the subject areas that we're looking to support these students in. concerns, not surprisingly, and you may have seen articles around other school boards that are struggling with this, making sure that there's equitable access for all students. Parents are also concerned about the location or number of schools, certainly if transportation is or isn't provided, but also distance to travel. There was a concern also that it is a withdrawn focus or withdraws funding from other subjects or programs as well, which I can understand. One of the other questions that we asked was around, are there other specialized programs that we should consider? I was pleased to see that 26% of parents said STEM, which sort of, because we already have a STEAM strategy, it's good to see that what we think parents want is actually what they want, so that's good. But another 18% identified a sports focus, which we thought was interesting as well. And we have had some schools take some preliminary looks at offering programs specialized for high performance athletes. So that's something that we looked at as well. And the other one that was sort of a theme was life skills. So things like finances, cooking, or sewing. The recommendation for next steps, this is similar to the point where we were in 2020 when we looked to develop a STEAM strategy. And so we had sort of identified interest from trustees, from parents. So at that point, we struck a committee. I've outlined in the report who was on the committee. It was sort of wide representation, including members of the Board of Trustees and also sort of stakeholders from across the system, and also some outside experts as well. We feel that that strategy will serve us well for this initiative. We'd like to broaden the scope a little bit. We'd like to include representation from SEAC and CPIC, get a couple of other departments involved as well. So Ryan's already offers his sort of services from facilities. And we'd like to look at two things. You know, what would a regional arts program look like? What are the logistics in terms of rolling it out? What schools might make sense? How much will it cost to bring back a real feasibility report to the board? We're also going to look at the regional sports program as well, though, as something else that parents have identified. So we're going to look at those two things. And so that'll be the work of the committee. So trustees, I will be asking for your help with that. It'll be a good time, I promise. And then the intention of that committee would be then to bring back a report to this table with the findings of the committee and recommendations to either implement or not implement. So certainly happy to take any questions that you might have based on either reading the report or from things that I've identified tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent Kroll. Trustees, do we have any questions for Superintendent Kroll? Okay. Trustee Saunders, you have a hand up. You have the floor.
Sorry, just a couple quick questions.
Sure.
You mentioned that there's a possibility that we might have to reallocate funding for some of these programs, or is that not an issue?
That was a concern brought by parents. They just want to make sure that we're not, as you know, robbing Peter to pay Paul, basically, okay. Right? And so part of what I'd like the committee to bring back is, here's what it'll cost. Right. We have to find the funds to be able to support that. Okay. And I'd like to be able to bring a couple of different options back for trustees to consider.
Okay. And thank you, Trustee Saunders. You have a follow-up?
Second question. Yeah, the sports focus, the high performance athletes. So what would we be sort of gearing them towards scholarship opportunities? Is that what we'd be looking for?
Trustee Saunders, you'd like to address the chair?
Oh, I'm sorry. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So your question was sports.
In terms of high performance athletes, are we sort of gearing them towards the opportunity to get scholarships? I'm just wondering what the end game would be.
I think Superintendent Kroll, you have experience in that.
Yeah, certainly. And through you, you know what, it could look like different things. Some school boards offer programs that provide support to students that are involved in high level sports. So whether it's gymnastics or tennis or OHL hockey, towards a career in that sport. Others have a specific focus for students that have an interest or a passion for a specific sport. So it could be a school might offer a specialized hockey or soccer program. So we'll look at a couple of different options. The high performance one, I think, is the one that parents are talking about, but we're going to explore that more in the work we'll do.
Thank you. Up next is Vice Chair Agnew.
Thank you very much, and through you, Mr. Chair. So the question I have is going to probably be next steps with respect to feasibility and taking a look at all of the different components that might go into an expansion like this. And I'm happy that you mentioned, other committees like SEAC, and because I guess the question I have is, would part of that consideration be, should we have students with special education needs that may require additional supports to participate in these programs? You know, is that going to be something that'll be considered so that we ensure that everybody has equitable access to that? that I wasn't sure if that was something that would play into that next step, Superintendent Crowell?
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. Like, we want to make sure that everyone's there at the planning stages and not figuring out later how we might support student needs. So that's why we want to have representation early in the planning stages, so we can make sure that all student needs are being considered as we try to develop a program that to meet the needs that parents are identifying. So short answer is yes.
Vice Chair, go ahead.
Yeah, follow up, Mr.
Go
Chair.
ahead, go ahead.
So in a situation like that, and I know it's a little bit early, but I know that we have looked at like programs like French immersion where we've had to be very specific in the educational assistance support or in the I support, like the itinerant support. So would this be something as well that we would need to look for? We would need to look for educational assistance, or we would need to look for specific supports that have experience in the arts that could assist. Like, do we think that that would prevent or that would provide any type of barriers? Or
Superintendent Crowell, I think.
does that make
That's
sense?
it's a good thought. Yeah, no, I'll be honest, that hadn't occurred to me to be that precise with the staffing, but that's why we want lots of different people and ideas around the table. At the minimum, we would certainly want to ensure that there's support for students that enter those programs to be able to say that it's barrier free, that they can, everyone can come and participate in this program.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Up next is Trustee Carabella. You have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I hope I can formulate this correctly. So I'm glad you brought up STEAM because, and it's called like a strategy. So it's going into the different schools, bringing the STEAM projects and hopefully to all our schools. And I see this as being a way, like gathering everyone in one school. So, but STEAM has the A, so there's the arts. But I'm just wondering how to resource, we probably have limited resources. So what happens to the arts and sports in the other schools as this school gets built up?
Sure. And you know what, I'm glad you picked up on that because we've definitely noticed there's already work being done with our STEAM strategy that will support the work that could be done here. I think what it will boil down to is our STEAM strategy right now is two things. As we said, we're trying to bring STEAM into all of our schools. And then also we're looking to pilot, as Matt Kovacs mentioned a couple of weeks ago, at a couple of our second beyond what they might be able to access in the typical high school program. I think that's what we're talking about here is I think we want to raise the level for all students in terms of art, but we also want to be able to provide the students that have a passion or an interest, sort of that student that's what they do, that's their hobby, that's what they do on nights and weekends, they're dancing or they're playing an instrument, to be able to provide programming for them, as you said, that would gather them in one place, probably sort of, and it could look like one per municipality. So one school, kind of like we have for our other specialized programs, like French immersion, for example. Does that make sense?
Trustee Carabella, you have a follow-up?
Sure. What I wanted to say, I'm glad you also mentioned what parents want, because I think that in these specialized programs, even AP and IB and STEM and the arts, it's really reflects what parents want for their children too. So for them to succeed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other trustees' hands up. So Superintendent Crowell, I want to thank you and Dr. Collymore and your staff at the back. There's lots of work that went into this report. Thank you so much. This is very exciting to see.
Agreed.
These ideas come up and parents giving feedback. And so thank you so much for this. Looking forward to the next steps.
Thank you.
In this thing.
And so we're looking to strike the committee after March break. So I'll be reaching out to trustees at that time for your interest and looking forward to continued collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Crowell. We now move on to our next order of business, which is information items. Item 11.1, student trustee update. Student trustees, please present your report.
Sorry. So I will be starting with the achieving section for our report tonight. On Thursday, we held a consultation meeting with the leaders of student councils across our system. The purpose of this meeting was to solicit feedback and recommendations to expand on feedback heard from our student senate regarding student council best practices. We are actually also, was not at the time of this report being written, but we are having a follow-up consultation tomorrow with our student council leaders. So we're very excited to share some of the feedback in our next report from these two meetings. We're in the process of drafting a report outlining these recommendations, so sort of compiling the common themes that we see throughout these consultations. And this is going to be the first step in a longer consultation process with student councils and staff. We foresee the end result of this report being something that can be sent to staff advisors and administrations prior to the beginning of the next school year as sort of best practices with student council, what student government structures do students respond best to as they sort of start to implement these practices for the next school year. As well, all three of us had a really cool opportunity to visit a student senate meeting at the District School Board of Ontario Northeast, which was organized by their student trustees. We shared senate best practices, some of our past initiatives, because they've recently implemented sort of a similar senate structure to ours. It was really exciting to collaborate with students from other boards and see how another senate works. We shared, some ideas and some advice back and forth, and we look forward to continuing these types of collaborations in the future.
I will be saying the believing portion of the report. So starting at our Osta-ACO Board Council Conference in February, we were given the opportunity to have many Catholic Board Council breakout sessions. We had a thoughtful and engaging discussion through a session run by Development and Peace, where we discussed the importance of social justice and the Catholic social teachings. In another session, we broke out into regions and spoke to other Catholic student trustees from across the province to work through issues in Catholic education. We worked together to discuss solutions and resolutions other boards have found to similar issues. Additionally, our faith ambassadors, including Ari, spearheaded a plan to create a short video for Catholic Education Week in May. This video was built around the theme, We Are Many, We Are One, and was filmed during our breakout sessions. And this is currently in the works, and we will be sure to send it out once it's completed. As well, we received a wonderful presentation from the Catholic Principals Council of Ontario, and we look forward to continuing our work with them in the future. And furthermore, our Catholic Faith and Action Subcommittee has published the first post in their Lenten initiative through social media to promote the HCCF's 24-hour fast.
And finally, I will be highlighting our belonging section for tonight. So during the past few weeks, many of our HCDSB secondary schools, as I hope many of you have saw, expanded their Halton Food for Thought programs, providing our students with nutritional fuel to keep them going throughout the day. Many of our students are excited to see this program come to fruition within their own schools. And during our last Student Senate meeting at St. Kateri Tekakwitha, the student trustees presented their Student Senate and School Connections presentation to our HCDSB student senators. This interactive presentation allowed our student senators to think creatively of how they can foster belonging within each of their respective schools and how they can create stronger connections between our students and within our board.
Thank you, student trustees, for your report. And at this point in time, I shall open up the floor to trustees for questions. Trustees, do we have any questions for our student trustees? Seeing none, I think you're off the hook right now. So thank you so much for your presentation. Oh,
Chair.
Oh, I see your hand. Okay, sorry. Trustee Kennedy, you have the floor.
I'm not sure if I might have missed this part, but there was a climate change survey sent out to students recently, and it had some grades on there as low as grade 6. What is it? Just the form had that, or was it sent out to elementary students?
So, Trustee Kennedy, that survey is different from the report right now.
No, I know. But
there are two different things right now. So we're talking about a student trustee report and going to the student trustees. So that's a different question. It's not germane to this topic. So we shall move on, Trustee Kennedy. Any other trustees have any questions? Seeing none, thank you, student trustees, for your report. And we shall move on to our next order of business, which is Director's Report. Director Klein, please present your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, and to all of you here tonight. The Director's Report is partly made up of things that I felt were timely and ones that you might be receptive to. And some of them were sneaky ways of answering questions that have come up over the last week and a half from some of the trustees. So I am getting a few birds with one stone, hopefully. So the director's report through again, the pillars and the priorities that we have of achieving, believing, and belonging. We'll look at summer learning. And yes, there will be a summer and there will be learning. Grade 10 de-streaming. Just a review of Lenten activities as we head more or less toward the third or middle of Lent, and a bit about something that we just passed through, which was February, or we could also use the term Feduary. In terms of the summer learning results from last summer we had, I think, an impressive number here of 3,614 students who completed summer school in 2022. You've probably seen with our PD days and others, we do surveys of a lot of different things, and the results of nearly 98% of the students obtained a credit through asynchronous online learning. According to summer school survey conducted by the research services, 80% of parents agreed that asynchronous online learning worked well for their child during the summer school program. 71 respondents said they would enroll their child in an online course again, and 70% of parents indicated a preference for the online asynchronous mode of delivery, and 30% of parents preferred an online synchronous mode of delivery. 65% of students indicated a preference for online asynchronous. 7% of students preferred online synchronous. Not sure if that was early morning or approximately 20% of respondents preferred face-to-face delivery. I do want to, this didn't get on this slide, but I do want to note that I did talk to Superintendent Del Sordo, and I asked in terms of moving forward, I think that's a key question. He said that not unlike Superintendent Crowell saying that after the March break, we're going to regroup, there will be some meeting of the minds in terms of Con Ed between March break and the end of March, and they'll begin to look at what we will plan for the summer. What we want to look at is the pending enrollment numbers. They'll determine whether or not that the courses will be online or whether they'll be face-to-face. There is an understanding and an acknowledgement that perhaps for senior courses, in particular mathematics, English, and science courses, face-to-face might be preferable, but they will have the decision made at that point. Grade 10 de-streaming. In accordance with the Ministry of Education direction, the HCDSB began offering de-streamed math, grade 9 math during the 2021-2022 school year, and we removed the grade 9 applied stream for the 2022-23 school year. Of course, as the pressures of COVID were still with us, but hopefully abating. Board staff are collecting data right now and over the next few weeks, including credit accumulation rates, student option sheet courses, selections for grade 10, and education surveys. As we're in the early process yet, we do need more data and more information. Because of this limited data, we're not yet considering the de-streaming for beyond grade 9 for the next year. Some of the things when I was talking to Superintendent Crowell, would want to look at the credit accumulation rate. We want to know the pass-fail rate, and I think there were a few other points of data that we'd want to look at that point. In terms of Lenten activities, we have, if you're on Twitter, you're probably seeing tons of activities from the schools in terms of their Lenten activities. We have shared prayer materials with all of our schools through the school chaplains and the faith animators. Schools are encouraged to participate in one or more of the following. Development and Peace, which again is the Canadian branch of Caritas, which is the global church in terms of charity. The Think Fast campaign, and Halton Catholic Children's Foundation 24-hour fast campaign as well. And for most of you, I know this is not news, and you're all invited and encouraged to again promote or take part in those. February, Halton Food for Thought Feduary campaign was, I think, well promoted and well advertised. The HCDSB has enjoyed a long-standing partnership with Halton Food for Thought through the provision of various nutrition programs in our schools. Many other boards have foundations and organizations similar. More than 35 of our schools that partner with HFFT ensured that no one goes hungry were part of this campaign. And so February was was given the moniker February month at HFFT, and we participated in this campaign to raise awareness and support healthy eating in schools. 8 of our schools across the district opened their doors to special guests and dignitaries, some of whom are here in this room, together with students and school staff, and they helped prepare healthy meals and snacks and a nutritious breakfast for students. And we, of course, picture is worth 1,000 words, and we can see some of our friends and colleagues in these pictures. At this point, if you have any questions about any of these or anything else, I'm more than happy to.
Thank you, Director Klein. We have a couple of questions. Trustee Kennedy, I apologize. I lowered your hand. I thought your hand was up for the previous section. Trustee Kennedy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Klein. So summer school, you mentioned options online or in person. It sounds like right now it's only online. We know the public board has in person and online. Do you know why we would have that? Is it just a rollover from COVID? Because I've had some questions from parents whose children do learn better in person, especially with math. They want to be there, and the teacher can read their body language. So I just don't want them to be at a competitive disadvantage. So I guess there's not much to report, but you'll let us know in a week or so.
Yeah.
Director Klein?
Yeah, we will let you know by the end of March. You did see that. I know there are parents who obviously would say, I'd like face-to-face for my Johnny or my Robert. But we also, again, you saw the stats from last year in terms of what parent feedback was as well. Again, you also saw the commitment, particularly in some areas like those fairly specific courses in the upper grades of high school, where I think they would endeavor to try and have face-to-face if possible.
Thank you. Trustee Kennedy, do you have a follow-up? No, thank you. Vice Chair Agnew, you have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I didn't get a sneaky question in time for your report, so I'm sneaking one in now, if that's okay. So I do have a question, and it's been something that has come up this week. It's something I've inquired about before at the board, but I wanted to ask a question with respect to students requesting a grade 13, and I'm doing that in air quotes for those who aren't seeing this. So, for students who do want to return for an additional year, what does that process look like, if you wouldn't mind just identifying what the process looks like? And then I do have a follow-up question, if that's okay, because it is happening now in some of our schools.
Director Klein?
Sure, thank you very much. And I'm going to lean on Superintendent Kroll in a minute. I would say, yeah, grade 13 is one that I sadly do remember, grade 13, but there were 13 grades then, so it's different. But I did have friends who tried grade 14 and 15, in fact. But I do understand that as well. I know that there is a tight connection between guidance department and administration and students and parents in high school as we head into the final year, the goal of final year of grade 12. There certainly are students who have accumulated the credits or are about to accumulate the credits, but for a variety of reasons might want to consider staying for some more courses. And the goal would be to have them stay for 3 courses. And the goal would be to have them work with their guidance counselor and their principals, vice principals, so that there's a rationale and a reason for why. We do want to ensure that we understand the needs of each of our students. Clearly, these are not students I think you're referring to who have struggled throughout and are, still shy of their 32. These are ones who have different rationales for it. I'll turn over to Superintendent Kroll, but I do believe that's important, that the context and the reality of each family and each student is important in those regards.
Sure, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. And I'm a little rusty myself, so I'm going to ask Superintendent Cordero, maybe he can help me out as well. So we're going to get a 2-for-1 deal here. The short answer is it depends, and it depends on how many credits the students accumulated. It depends on what their pathway is. It depends on whether they want to be a part-time or a full-time student. I would say typically school administrators and guidance counselors work with a student to develop a plan, right? So here's the pathway you're looking to get to. Here's the courses you have. Here's maybe courses where you need to upgrade, or here's core credits that you don't have that you need. Typically we would say, and this is outside of students with special education needs, because there's different rules for those. But if a student wants to return for one course or two courses, that probably doesn't make sense for that student, right? So we would typically say a student should be taking a 3 or 4 credit semester. And the other thing that a school administrator has to sort of weigh out is, how do I make sure that returning grade 12 students don't take up spots for the grade 12 students that are also in school, right? So that if a large number are returning, there might not be enough grade 12 chemistry or grade 12 physics spots for those students. So it is a bit of a balancing act. I would say pretty much case by case, but it is a conversation that school administrators and guidance counselors have with parents and with students to try to provide a pathway through. There's also a credit limit that students can have. It's a 34 credit limit, by which after that, schools don't receive funding for students if they want to take more than 34 credits. Students that want to take more than those credits then can access that through Thomas Merton, through our continuing education center. Does that help?
Did you mention that Superintendent Cordero would add on to this, or I'm not sure what I heard.
I'd said if you want to add anything that I might have missed, so feel free.
Okay, so this has been my lived experience. Students with an individual education plan are entitled for a 5th year, whether they've graduated with their 30 credits or not. Students who are entering have completed their 4 years but have not graduated with their 30 credits are certainly entitled to return to the school to complete their Ontario Secondary School diploma. And students who do not have an IEP, have graduated with 30 credits, generally will have a conversation with the guidance counselors to map out a plan in terms of post-secondary pathways and programming. But approval will require, just like for all students, be had with the school principal. Some school principals are more active than others in having that individual conversation with students. But generally speaking, students, as Superintendent Kroll noted, students who have achieved 33 credits or less beyond the 33 credit threshold, they won't be, the school won't be receiving ministry funding and to support their learning. So the priority sometimes with school principals are to look at, hey, if you're coming back, you've got to have a plan that's going to position you better for the workplace, apprenticeship program, college or university, whatever pathway you choose. Because if you're simply coming here to take a few courses so you can play a sport or engage in a short-term club participation, it may remove the opportunity for other students to access those courses, because then those courses become filled and there's only limited seats in certain classes and subject areas. So
thank you, Superintendent Cordero. Vice Chair.
Thank you. So just so I have a clarification and then just a follow-up, if that's okay, Mr. Chair. So thank you. So I do have a clarification. Is the criteria just solely based on an academic plan, or other considerations like social maturity, socialization, mental health? Are those things also taken into consideration, or is it just strictly the academic path, if you wouldn't mind?
Superintendent Kroll.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Sure, Mr. Chair. I can tell you my experience would be that working with the family to try and meet the needs of the student to best prepare them for where they want to go. So it's not about it's not about the option sheet or the transcript. It's about the kid.
Thank you. Your follow-up question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So my follow-up question is this uniform across the board? So what's happening at HT, is it the same thing happening at STA as far as happening at ND, as far as this process and the criteria that's involved? Is that a uniform piece across our board, if you wouldn't mind?
I'll pass this to Director Klein.
Sure. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Trustee Agnew. I'll turn the question around a little bit and say that and answer it by saying it should be. And I think that would be the follow through in terms of reconnecting with staff with regard to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. Next up is Trustee Carabella. Trustee Carabella, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering at what month or what time do students sign up for the summer school? When does that registration usually take place?
I think Director Klein.
It's a month that ends in a Y. I do know that. I'm going to see if there's anyone out here who knows exactly when that occurs, and I don't see anyone from our.
I mean, like having been a summer school principal a number of years ago, through you, Mr. Chair, I can tell you that it's usually like late April, early May that registration opens. Part of it is, especially for students, like the registration often comes late because they may not know they need to take summer school until they get their report card, right? So we would open it early and we would keep it open as late as possible within reason to be able to make sure that we have enough staff to support them. But certainly not, it's not imminent that the registration would be opening.
Thank you, Trustee Carabella. You have a follow-up?
No, thank you. That's
Thank you. Director Klein?
I'll just add to that as well. Like a lot of other decisions that go post June, the GSNs and the funding from the province, even though we would all bet and expect and hold our breath on things, experience has taught us that, you know, that isn't always the case. So.
Thank you, Director Klein. Up next is Trustee Paul. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is actually just to expand on Vice Chair Agnew's question just about the returning students. So this has been an issue in our current high schools right now. I just have two questions, if that's okay. One of them is you mentioned the max 34 credit limit funding, I guess, gets maxed out. Is that separate? Sorry, how do I want to say this? Is that, so if you are a student with an IEP, is that completely separate? Okay, so I'm learning that as well. So any IEPs are considered mitigating factors. It's completely different. Okay. Second then, I know we don't have a formal process for this, and it has caused a lot of chaos in both Trustee Agnew and my life this week, as I'm sure it's rippled over here. Is there an appeal process? So is there something in place that if a principal has said, no, this is not okay, where can a parent go? So what is the next step to do?
Director Klein?
I would think, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, and to you, Trustee Powell, I would say that based on the conversation tonight, I think it's probably not a bad idea to re-engage the school. I think we all know kind of the order of things. I think the next would be to engage the superintendent of that school as well.
Thank you, Trustee Powell. Clarification?
Clarification. So you would recommend to parents to go back to the principal or go Klein? To the superintendent, to the SO?
Director Klein?
Well, yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I think, again, just thinking of the nuance of the conversation this evening and the commitment to just ensure that there's maybe a greater understanding amongst our schools about what we've conversed tonight. I would say that it might not be a bad idea to re-engage the school, but I think timing would be everything so that that communication can be in place.
Thank you, Director Klein. I think Trustee Powell is looking for further clarification.
I would think we are going to be communicating this to ensure with the school. And so given it's 9 o'clock at night, I would think give us a reasonable amount of time. And then I think that re-engagement could occur.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We move on to Vice Chair Agnew. You have your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just on that vein, is that we talk a lot here about communication, and I think a lot of the key to some of the challenges that we face with complaints from families has just been either misinformation or lack of information or not being provided in a timely fashion. So on that vein, if there was a denial that was given, is part of that denial process the information provided to families to say, should you disagree with this decision, this is how you would go about an appeal? Like, I know that from a suspension, when a suspension is given, that there is, automatic communication that is provided to the family to say, should you disagree with this decision, you can do X, Y, Z. Is the same thing provided with respect to denials for that return year?
Director Klein?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Trustee Agnew, I would say that I think it is understood that if there is a decision made by a school that is something that is something that might be disputed or something that might not be seen as correct, then parents can always contact the superintendent.
Director Klein, I would just interject there and say sometimes it's not very clear. Is it something, Vice Chair Agnew, is this your question?
Yeah, I would just leave a comment that it's assumptions or presumptions of what would happen next, I think, are where we perhaps may find ourselves falling into some problems. So I believe that the clearer that we can be in communication to families as far as what process is, what the timelines look like, and then what their mechanisms might be should there be an appeal process. I think that's really important because there may not be parents who understand that the next step is to go to a superintendent. And respectfully, if the decision from the principal has been a no, there's going to be a reluctancy perhaps to go back to that. So I'm just saying that there might be an opportunity for further discussion and review of what that existing process looks like, and anything that would accompany that would be my last.
Thank you, Director Klein.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other hands up. So Director Klein, once again, thank you for your report. And this is going to be a standing item moving forward. And we look forward to your report at every board meeting. Moving on, we have a very interesting item now, 11.3, appointment of student trustees at the 2023-2024. And I believe Superintendent Del Soto is not here. He's missing tonight. But Director Klein, you can speak.
He gave me, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, and to you, trustees, I have the honor of and the pleasure of introducing two newcomers, and I get to steal the opportunity for this from Superintendent Del Sordo. We have a report that has gone to you, and I do want to say that if what we've seen so far this evening is a reflection and some type of prediction about how the next several months will go. I think it's going to be absolutely wonderful. We have before us here two brand new student trustees. And the two student trustees that we have are Lauren McGuire from St. Ignatius Loyola and Dia Deepu, who's from Assumption. So welcome to our. And returning, who will be the senior student trustee, as they say in the Senate, they're the senior student trustee from our board, from St. Francis Xavier. We have, of course, Ariana Chua again returning to us. So it is a blessing and truly a reflection of the wisdom of our youth that we do have that nice continuity. We have some new people. We have, again, the veteran here. And again, hopefully that will be something that would continue. So we can have the opportunity for these young students to be the voice of, again, so many students in our board, and not just the ones that are around you at your in your schools, but also in terms of your memory and your experience, the ones who are here from the little time when you were kindergartens until the time maybe you might avail yourself of some of our adult education. It's an honorable, I think, and I think probably something that makes you a little fearful of the future, but people have put their confidence in you. And we're very, very proud and happy for this news. If you take a look at the report, you can see that certainly from my vantage point, going back many years, the accomplishments of these students, this is not something I think I would have had on a resume at this point in my life. And so truly, I know you should be very proud of yourselves. I'm sure your families are very proud of you, and your schools are as well. Students are, I think, reflect good character and reflect a lot of success and dedication, but they're also the products, I think you'd agree, of good families and good communities. And so we welcome you here today. And on behalf of at least the administration here, I want to thank you and welcome you. And I look forward to the months ahead.
Thank you, Director Klein. Thank you, Director Klein, for presenting our newly elected student trustees. And likewise, we look forward to working with you as Board of Trustees. And as you can see, it's a very interesting meeting and exciting to good to have you here. So we look forward to you joining us. Okay, thank you so much. We shall now move on down our agenda. Have, sorry, under miscellaneous information, the next order of business, we have two notices of motions, which is in under noted items. We shall not be talking about them. It's in the package. Next order of business is correspondence, and we do not have any items there. And then we move on to open question period, which is Director Klein, do we have any questions submitted?
No, we don't.
Thank you, Director Klein. That was easy. We do not have to move into camera. And our final order of business is a resolution regarding absentees. We have all trustees present here today. Trustees present here. Trustee Kelly has left in between, which is been present. So we move on to the final item, adjournment and closing prayer. May I have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Saunders, you got it. Moved by Trustee Saunders. Looking for a seconder. Trustee Carabella, I saw your hand up there. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Just before we jump to the closing prayer, I want to thank Nikki once again for helping us all throughout with board packages and board meetings. You see the meetings running so smoothly. And I'd like to welcome Elizabeth to help us out moving forward. And you see, it's an easy board meeting. So thank you so much. So with that, we shall move on to the closing prayer. Trustee Murphy, could you lead us in the closing prayer?
In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. I just thought as we're moving close to the halfway point of Lent, I found a nice prayer that I thought I would share with you all. So, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow charity. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is error, the truth. Where there is doubt, the faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying to ourselves that we are born to eternal life. Through Christ our Lord.
Thank you, everybody, for a great meeting. Thank you, Trustee Murphy, for the closing prayer. Good night.